Hello, everybody. Greetings from London. Thank you very much to Paola and Christina for inviting me to speak today. And I'm very sorry that I can't be with you in person. I'd much rather be in Argentina. It's raining here in London, but none of us can travel at the moment, unfortunately. So let me start sharing my screen and this presentation. So what I'm going to talk about today is how I've used evocative objects to trigger memories, how I've used that in my own work, and then from this research, how I've used this as a technique for teaching students. In her interesting chapter on the relationship between the senses and memory, Susan Stewart writes that memories have a material basis. Memories are a register of a physical experience the body once had, either stored in the conscious or unconscious mind, and memories inform our future actions, referring in particular to the association of touch with the museum and with collections of objects. She concludes, just as memory enables us to distinguish our waking from our sleeping selves, so does touch cross the threshold between what is unconscious and what is conscious, what is passive and what is active, what is dead and what is living. Memory is the animation of the past necessary to our orientation in the future. So this is from a book, Material Memories, Design and Evocation, edited by Marius Quint, Christopher Brewers and Jeremy Ainsley. And what's important to me about this quotation is the connection between touch and memory. I'm now going to tell you the story of how I myself worked with touch, the sense of touch, and touching an evocative object to animate my own memories from the past. And this could be thought of as an autoethnographic process. The film I made was an experimental artistic film that's based on personal truth and experience, but it's not the story of my memory. Autoethnography is not the same as autobiography. The word auto and the words ethnography are combined in autoethnography. Auto is about using information from the researcher's own lived experience, so starting with the self. And ethnography is about using this to give insights about social groups. So you've got auto, which is about the self, ethnographic, the study of social groups. Combined together, it's using a study of the self to inform a study of social groups that the self might belong to. And my memories were a starting point in this autoethnographic process. My project started with memories of my grandmother, but ended up making statements about women in general and the work that they do, how it's taken for granted and forgotten about. I was very close to my grandmother, who lived in Sweden. When she died in the summer of 2013, myself and my mother had to clear out her apartment. We were really upset, and it was so hard to decide what to keep and what to give away from a lifetime of my grandmother's precious objects, all the things that were really dear to her that she'd collected in her place. I myself only lived in a very small apartment. I didn't need any more furniture, so I just kept small items that I knew she used to remember her by, like things from her kitchen. Although I'm not religious, I decided to keep her rosary beads. To me, This is a very mysterious object because I wasn't brought up Catholic. I don't even know how to use rosary beads. I'd never seen my grandmother use these rosary beads. This is something she did in private. But I found this string of rosary beads along with her prayer book. I didn't know why the beads were broken. I didn't even know what to do with it or how it was used. So I put it away in a drawer to keep it safe because I knew that it was very precious to her, something that she handled a lot. In 2015, I went to Italy to do an artist residency, and this artist residency was in a former convent. Now, normally I work on a computer and I work a lot with projections. But I decided to do something new on this residency. I left these familiar tools at home in order to challenge myself and to get back to working with ink, paint, charcoal, and other traditional drawing materials that I hadn't actually touched in years. I didn't have any plan about what I would end up doing there, but as a starting point, I brought with me my grandmother's broken rosary beads. I ended up drawing these beads over and over again with different materials every day. As I told you, I didn't know how they were used, so I visited the local church and saw the old women praying with the rosary and what they did with them with their hands. It made me think a lot about my Swedish grandmother because, as I said, she'd recently died. And I also thought about my other Scottish grandmother who died over 20 years earlier. As I was making the drawings and remembering these women from my family, I thought a lot about the invisible work that mothers do to support their families. Endless domestic labor that leaves no trace, sacrifices made for others and taken for granted. The 12th drawing that I made in the residency of the rosary beads was produced through scrubbing holes in pieces of black paper while saying the rosary myself. I did one act of scrubbing on a piece of paper for each bead. The reason I did this was because the holes that I were making in the paper looked to me like the highlights of light shining on each black bead of the rosary. The line of pieces of paper left behind looked to me like a film strip, a record of the time taken to scrub each one. And for me, this demonstrated the idea that, like a film strip, the string of rosary beads is also a device to record actions over time. These actions are the prayers that are supposed to be said for each bead. In the final exhibition, I only showed these pieces of paper. I didn't show any of the other drawings that I'd done because this idea about recording time seemed to me to be the most important thing I'd learned on the residency. I showed this work in progress to a couple of galleries, and I got invited to do the performance at an exhibition of experimental animation in Sichuan Institute of Fine Arts in China. I thought they'd think I was crazy proposing to do a performance instead of showing an animation, but they really understood what I intended. To me, this was like making an animation in front of an audience rather than showing the finished animation. For each bead on the rosary that I had in one hand, I said a few words and scrubbed a hole in a piece of paper. So the time taken for my actions and the process of my labor was recorded in the sheets of paper, as if it were a frame-by-frame animation that I was making in front of an audience. I was then invited to perform this work at a big exhibition of 100 feminist artists in London. However, although this work is often framed as feminist, I didn't intend it to be specifically just about the work that women do, although that is my experience. I was also interested in all of the manual labourers who work so hard day after day and whose labour is invisible. So I was also thinking about street cleaners, people who clean the underground, people who clean buildings. I was thinking about cleaners of all kinds, male or female. Later on, I was lucky enough to go and stay on my own in a residency in a beautiful cottage in Ireland. This residency is in a place called Kilrelig. It was a lovely place, but it was really, really cold. And I had to clean out and light this fire every day, this stove. It was really hard work. It was heavy carrying the fuel. It was hard work clearing away all the ash. But actually the women in Ireland and in many other countries used to have to do that every single day, cleaning out the ashes, gathering fuel for the fire, building the fire up again. So again, this made me think about all the hard work that women do for their families. And so I ended up making pictures out of the ash, like a ritual to record the process of cleaning away the ash. I called them Aschenputtel. Aschenputtel is the German name for Cinderella. Cinderella being a fairy story about a girl who's always having to clean away the ashes and how she ends up, you know, having a great life, marrying a prince. So I was thinking a lot about women cleaning the ashes, and so I made a picture, a series of pictures in which I recorded the actions of cleaning away the ashes with my fingers on pieces of paper. And when I got back to work, I was working at the time at the Royal College of Art, I borrowed the rostrum camera and I started to animate dust and cleaning products under the camera. Thinking about all these pictures that I'd made and also memories of my own experience from when I was younger, because when I was a student, I worked as a cleaner. Also as a young artist, when I didn't have a job, I also worked as a cleaner, cleaning people's houses. And this was how I supported myself when I was starting out. So thinking about these experiences of my own of being a cleaner, I started to experiment with making marks through erasure with a scouring pad, you know, one of these things you used to clean and you used to scrub, with bleach, cleaning product, and a knife. So this was a work about repetitive cleaning and the constant ritual of repetitive cleaning. You can see it in the back on the wall behind me, this one. And it was made through cleaning tools and cleaning products. So it was about cleaning, made by cleaning and with cleaning products. Carrying on these ideas, I then imagined myself in the role of a cleaner, dressed up in an overall and a headscarf, like my grandmothers would have worn to clean the house. I took photographs of myself dressed up in this manner, and then cut silhouettes out of paper. And the reason I did this is because it's like a portrait, an abstract portrait of a cleaner, but the character's not shown directly. Her silhouette is made in the form of a paper cut, a hole in the paper, an absence, an erasure. So you don't see her, you see her absence. And this was intended to symbolize the invisibility of domestic labor and the lack of voice that ordinary workers in general have in British society. So you can see I'd done a lot of experiments, and I started to scan the bleached and inked papers I'd made, and working with this idea of scrubbing the floor, and gathered all this material, all these experiments together. And I then used this as a research to make a 3-minute film, which I called Erasure. I was able to draw upon all of the ideas that I'd gone through in the making of the film, in which I combined drawn animation with animated cleaning products. And it was been screened in a number of festivals and art galleries, including Holland Animated Film Festival, Venice Biennale and Brussels Art Fair. And it also featured in an exhibition at the Oaxaca Museum of Contemporary Art in Mexico, in many other places. So I'm now going to change my screen sharing so that I can show you it. So I'm going to stop sharing this window and start sharing a different window and play the movie. Sharing this one and go back to sharing my PowerPoint. So after making the film, I went on to create a number of other artworks around the theme for a solo exhibition at Hanmi Gallery in Korea, in Seoul in 2018. And these all are various forms of expanded animation. So Scrubbed Clean is an installation of animation that's projected over 112 panels. And these panels were made from scrubbing through layered sheets of paper with a scrubbing brush using bleach, bicarbonate of soda, plain flour, and abrasive cleaning products. So here you can see all the panels. And over these panels, I played an animation made from charcoal drawings that I did of my hand with a scrubbing brush. And it's the same scrubbing brush in the drawing that I used to make the panels that it's scrubbing over. And the hand is like a disembodied hand that just constantly scrubs away at the wall endlessly, repeating the gestures that I used to make the panel. It roams across the wall, unconstrained by a frame, and it never stops scrubbing. It just goes on and on and on scrubbing. And this is a short overview of the exhibition. I'll just stop there. And so far I've talked about my own research, but I'm going to put this in a bit more of a theoretical frame now. So all of this research started out with a very personal object, my grandmother's rosary. And collecting personal objects is a way to store memories. The key to the process I've just shown you was the sense of touch, was handling an object, of physical activities related to that object. So starting with handling a string of rosary beads, thinking what they were used for, brought up associations for me with sacrifice through physical labor. Now I got this idea of evoking emotional memories from the use of an object, from observing a series of workshops that used object analysis at Drama Centre London. And this comes from method acting teachers such as Konstantin Stanislavski and Uta Hagen, and also Lee Strasberg. And these teachers, as part of preparing actors for a role, they use techniques with personal objects, using them as triggers for emotional and sense memories that the actors can then access in their performance. This technique helps the actors to access deep personal emotions, and then they can use them in their performances to make themselves seem more authentic. So, for example, if I wanted to cry in a performance, I could maybe bring my grandmother's rosary, and thinking about my grandmother dying might make me cry. And then eventually I could train myself to cry in the performance without the rosary. So objects are used in actor training, the method acting training, to evoke emotions as a part of the training. And I was invited to a PNCA in Portland in Oregon to do a summer workshop with the artist Rose Bond, Professor Rose Bond. And as one of the activities that we did on the workshops, boundary crossings workshops, I asked students to bring a personal object with special significance for them. And we then did a series of exercises in which they closely examined, drew, and talked about their objects in groups. So they did this as a group activity. They brought in these objects, talked about them in a group. This was a starting point for them to create a piece of work that addressed their own personal identity. The students produced a rich variety of pieces over the next 2 weeks that resulted from their initial object analysis. So the theme of our project, our exhibition and workshop, was Inside the Outsider. So it was about conveying private inner worlds, based on the idea that we affirm our identity through repetitive actions and rituals. So as part of the preparation for this, we got the students to work with these objects. And the students produced some amazing works. Jerry Ransheng started with a photograph from his childhood, and he projected old family photographs onto a papier-mâché head. With this work, he wanted to look at his feelings of dislocation of being a Chinese student in America. Amy Love started with her passport, questioning her identity as Jewish American. She created an animation using old family photographs and drawings. The animation was played on a dinner table, which was set up as if for a traditional family dinner. Ari Gabrielle started with an old toy, and she made an absolute exquisite stop motion to the accompaniment of a poem she'd written, and she played it on an old TV set inside a cabinet of curiosities. So there was all kind of objects in the cabinet and lights you can see here along with her animation. It's a beautiful piece of work. And let me just show you a little bit of that. So that was work produced by students after a 2-week workshop. So they only had 2 weeks to make that. So to conclude, our memories are closely associated with objects we choose to store and keep. I'd call this an ideation methodology, what I've been doing, a way to generate new ideas. So I suggest following Stanislavski and other acting tutors and using objects as tools of ideation to help us come up with ideas for new projects, starting out with evocative objects to trigger emotional and sense memories. Is something that I also have done with MA film, documentary and animation students. I use this idea as a starting point for a writing workshop. Students are asked to bring in an object with particular significance for them. They create mind maps of associations that the objects bring up. They then work in twos to come up with an idea for a script inspired by their two objects. And then they work in a group to develop these further. So I hope that you might have found some ideas in there to inspire your own research and teaching. And I hope it's also an example of how personal research, our personal research as educators is able to feed into the teaching that we can then do and enrich our students' experience. So thank you very much for your attention. You can find me on Instagram at Birgitta Hosea. We've also got our website and a blog, or you're more than welcome to contact me at my email address at UCA, birgittahosea@uca.ac.uk. Thank you very much. Bye.